Welcome, critters! I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, players through the lens of sacred reading practices. And this particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 15, Part 2. And joining me again is Alyssa. Yay!
Hi.
It's been a week for both of us, so we're going to try our best on today's episode. So the icebreaker question that I have for today is, do you have any hidden talents?
Well, I guess it's a thing that not many people know now. But I used to be a recreational figure skater. Did all the shows, all the jumps, all the spins.
Lots of sparklies.
Yeah, loved the sparklies. It was the best part.
Yeah.
So haven't done it in years. So now I consider it a hidden talent because I can
Mhm.
still pull a lot of it off. But
I mean, it's kind of like riding a bike. You don't really forget the body, the physical memory.
yeah, there's some of the things that I'm like, I don't know how I used to do this at all, but a lot of them were, easy enough to pull off with a little bit of warm up.
Yeah, that's a pretty dope skill. I mean, you're in a cold area too, so you do have access to skating rinks. I'm sitting outside in the wintertime.
Yep. We have one of the only regulation hockey rinks that is outdoors.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I don't get to skate on it much because it's a hockey thing.
I didn't even know that they could have outdoor hockey rinks, but I guess that makes sense in cold areas.
Yeah, there's not many of them, but there's a couple.
Yeah. Well, mine is really silly. It has absolutely no practical purpose to it at all. But I'm very good at identifying car models.
Fascinating. That is, I don't know what to do with that. But I love
their headlights. Like if I see a pair of headlights, I can usually identify the make, if not the model or like the year of it.
That is a fascinating talent. How does one end up with that talent?
I'm just really observational. And so I've just, we see cars all day, every day when we're out and about in the world. And my brain has just decided to hold on to that information for some reason or another.
If it sticks for some reason, it sticks.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time staring at cars and traffic, and being like, oh yeah, that's a Ford, probably like early 2000s, 01, 02, 03, or BMW mid 2000s, 05, 06, I don't know why my brain has decided to hold on to that information.
The more you know, I guess.
Yeah. My friends in high school actually used to quiz me like on nights that we'd be out drinking and stuff, and like they'd be like, all right, what's that car? Like down the street we'd see the headlights and they'd be like, what kind of car is that one? And I'd be like, oh, it's probably Mitsubishi, yada 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 yada. Has absolutely no practical purpose at all.
No, it's a party skill.
But that's one of my talents that I don't really talk about often because it's useless.
That's fair. But fun.
Yeah. That was the first thing that came to mind for me. I was like, all right, let's talk about this really weird skill that I have for no reason. All right, so please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. So as always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So comment, like, subscribe, and then ready? All right, let's dive in. So as we open this episode, Vox Machina, they have just boarded a sky ship that is taking them to Vasselheim so that they can hand deliver the Horn of Orcus to the Grand Chantry of the Platinum Dragon. Keyleth, with some help from Vax, decides to create 2 polymorph scrolls while they are traveling and gives one to Vex and one to Tiberius. Vex teases Vax, saying that she thought he liked Gilmore, to which he responds, I'm hard to pin down. Grog stands at the front of the ship with Pike a la Titanic, while Vex hangs out with Captain Damon. On the third day, they are awoken by a sudden lurching of the ship, and as they rush to the deck, they notice a number of dragonoid winged creatures harrying the boat with riders on their backs. Tiberius immediately recognizes them as wyverns, and they all roll for initiative. Vex goes first by casting Hunter's Mark on the one griffin of the group, shooting an arrow with Hail of Thorns, as well as a regular arrow. The ship's guards go next and start loading large bolt throwers. Vax daggers and rolls a critical 19 on the first roll. The griffin and its riders grapple. Its rider grapples one of the ship's guards and tosses them over the edge of the ship. Tiberius follows suit and uses telekinesis to toss one of the wyvern riders off their steed. He also tries to speak to the remaining wyvern in Draconian to convince it to flee, but is unsuccessful. Grog rages and runs to the front of the ship, using some chain to attach himself to it, or at least tries to. I don't think he's actually successful in it. Keyleth casts Polymorph on a different wyvern and turns it into a bunny. The rider throws out a grappling hook, successfully catching theirself on the side of the ship, while the rider Tiberius tossed off is successfully caught by their wyvern, but it uses up the wyvern's entire turn. Another wyvern attacks Vex with its bite and then stings her with its poisonous stinger, while a different wyvern rider takes longbow shots at Keyleth and Trinket. Percy pulls out bad news and takes a successful wing shot at a wyvern. Scanlan uses Bigby's hand to grapple the griffin and forces the rider to fall off, but they manage to land on the ship's deck. He also inspires Vex with a quick song. Pike guiding bolts the griffin, but misses, so she uses her sprinter's boots to hustle over to Vex and gives her a superior healing potion. Vex uses the potion on her turn and then moves away from the rider close to her to shoot a lightning arrow at the griffin. She then has Trinket attack the wyvern that fell to the deck from Percy's wing shot, but rolls a 1. One of the ship's guards shoots a bolt at the griffin, but misses, while another draws a blade and uses their turn to join the fray near the front of the ship. Vax stabs the prone wyvern 3 times and uses his bonus action to scratch Trinket's ears. The griffin swoops down toward Keyleth and grapples her, then tosses her over the side of the ship. Tiberius uses telekinesis to pick up one of the riders to throw her into one of the loaded bolt ballista. Grog goes into a frenzied rage and attacks the prone wyvern, rolling a critical on his second hit. Keyleth, who is falling through the air, turns into an air elemental and casts Whirlwind against the griffin and one of the riders. The rider hits one of the ship's wings and falls off. The prone wyvern stands up and angrily strikes out at Grog, rolling a natural 20 against Vax with its poisonous stinger. Vax fails his constitution roll and becomes poisoned. The other wyvern rider throws a spear at one of the blue crystals that power the sky ship, damaging it as the entire ship lists to one side. It forces Tiberius to fall prone, but Vex and Grog succeed on their dexterity saving throws, so the two of them are now dangling off the side of the ship. The wyvern grapples Captain Damon, but doesn't have enough movement to toss him off. Percy, I don't know why I was combining Percy and Tiberius there, but Percy takes a wing shot at the wyvern holding Captain Damon, forcing it to fall prone onto the deck of the ship. He takes another shot at the wyvern, causing it to lose its grasp on the captain. Scanlan moves Bigby's hand to push one of the riders off the front of the ship successfully, then sends a healing word to Vax. Pike casts Spiritual Weapon and spears one of the wyverns. Vex, hanging off the side of the ship, braces her foot on Grog's shoulder to climb back up on deck and casts Hunter's Mark on the rider at the back of the ship. She then shoots her grappling arrow at them, pulling them off their steed. One of the ship's guards attacks the griffin and rolls a nat 20, killing it off. Vax daggers a wyvern and kills it off, and then runs over to Keyleth. Tiberius gets up from prone and casts telekinesis to rip off the remaining wyvern's wing, then spends some sorcerer's points to create some daggers to attack it further. Grog pulls himself back up onto the ship as well, and then attacks one of the 2 remaining riders, throwing them off the ship. Keyleth, in her air form, attempts to lift the boat from the side to balance it out, but does not succeed. The remaining wyvern bites Scanlan and then tries to stinger him, but he casts Cutting Words to reduce its attack, so it misses. Percy uses his pepper box to shoot at the wyvern and kills it off. Keyleth attempts to grab it before it falls, but doesn't succeed, although she is successful in removing the spear from the blue crystal, turning it back on. They do manage to capture the rider that Vex grappled with her arrow. Grog grabs them and dangles them over the side of the ship to ask what they were thinking and attacking them. The rider pleads for their life and then tells them that they live on an island below, making money through pirating. They ask Captain Damon what they usually do with the bandits, and he says they usually toss them overboard, so Grog releases the rider, letting them plummet. The rest of the group objects very loudly until they realize that the rider was still attached to Vex's grappling rope, so Vex pulls them up and offers them a job instead. Then Pike heals them while Scanlan goes through their pockets. Percy heads below deck to check on the container holding the Horn of Orcus, but Kima assures him that everything is fine. Although she does have a bit of a head wound from the tilting of the ship, Keyleth drops her elemental form and then they all head down to rest. And that's where they end the episode. So what do we think about the second
half? My first thought was how much I dislike rewatching combat. It's just not my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it can get a little bit rote.
Yeah, I don't mind combat the first time around or watching it live. It's rewatching it.
Mm-hmm.
That just, it doesn't do much for me. So I kept zoning in and out. So I have lots of disconnected thoughts this week, I think. I don't know, first use of polymorph as an offensive spell. So Keyleth got there first. Good for her.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from this was the ill-preparedness that they all had, as well as the novelty of the situation. And I think they're causing one another. It's like they've never been on a skyship before. They've never battled on a skyship before. And so they're presented with very different dynamics than they're used to.
That's fair. I think it's also interesting to see them try to get creative with spells. You know, Matt's always encouraged it, and I think they were a little more freeform in what that meant in the very beginning. So things like using telekinesis for daggers, which is not in the wording of the spell. It wouldn't fly.
Yeah.
You know, or making your spiritual weapon into a ranged weapon, which is also not in the, rules as written. It's stuff like that that stood out to me as like they're clearly trying to lean into being creative, which is great. But they're figuring out what that looks like on the internet with a very judgmental fandom.
That's very true. And like, I found it very interesting what their different reactions were to their ill-preparedness and the novelty of the situation. Like Tiberius hates it.
Oh, yes. Without a doubt.
Yeah. And like, I feel there was just different levels of like, all right, we can do this, or like, what the fuck is happening, to like, holy shit, I didn't know that could happen. Like, them having to combat, like quickly think on their feet to combat the like throwing them off the sides of the ship, like that, I think really challenged them.
Yeah. And I think they there were different levels of going with the flow too. Tiberius did not like anything that was going on. And just wanted things to go his way. Whereas like Keyleth got thrown off the boat and was like, okay, guess I'm flying now.
Yeah.
It's very in character, but it's also the players.
Yeah. And I think it really says something to like, Liam wasn't even there. He was on Skype on an iPad. And yet I feel is one of the more even-keeled characters in the situation. Like Percy's always even-keeled, except when his triggers are push.
Yeah.
But like him Vax was pretty even keeled. Even Grog was kind of in his element too, because he just thrives on chaos in general.
Right.
But like Pike definitely fumbled. Tiberius definitely fumbled. I think Vex just like panicked a little bit throughout. Keyleth was very much embracing it for sure. And Scanlan definitely, he always has the more strategic approach of like, what's the best thing that I can do with what I have. So
Right. Yeah, I think Liam always has that kind of effect in combat where he's very, even when he's worried, he's very mellow about it. Which is great because it's him and Travis that are like that, and they offset the other players when they start to panic. And I think that kind of you start to see it here. This is one of the first combats we see where people start to get really freaked out. And Liam and Travis are the ones who are kind of being chill about it and ready to roll with the punches.
And I think we also need to talk about Tiberius in this episode.
Yeah.
Like
Tiberius, it was quite a game for Tiberius.
You know, like he really didn't like what was going on. And even on one of his turns, he's like, I don't know what to do. You guys tell me what to do. And so like he got so frustrated with what was going on that he disconnected from what was going on, which is also classic him.
Yes.
He's like, if he doesn't like what's going on, if it's not going his way, he just
leaves. And when he doesn't leave, he just checks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like also the questioning of his roles is also really coming into play.
This is one of the first combats where you can see them both Marisha and Sam checking his math and checking his roles. Which I know that they do for a good chunk of his run. This is one where they stop being subtle about it.
Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes that I wrote down was Marisha after I think it was after she took the spear out of the blue crystal. Everyone was like, great idea, you fixed it, da-da-da-da-da, you're so smart. And Marisha goes like, oh, I don't need the validation. Save that for Orion.
Yeah.
I was like,
she's not wrong. Well, especially coming from Marisha and everything that she had to put up with early Vox Machina. You know, it is ridiculous what she had to put up with. And I think if anybody else had to put up with that, it wouldn't have gone nearly as well.
And Orion agrees. Like after she says that, he's like, yeah, I do need the validation. That is accurate.
Well, at least he knows.
Like, I feel like he knows what he's doing, you know, like it's comments like that like peek through the veil that he puts over himself of like, I just don't know what I'm doing, you know. He kind of has this like buffer that he puts forward of being like, oh, well, I didn't know, you know, I'm just playing around.
Well, and that's part of this whole Orion situation that we just don't talk about in the fandom. Like, if you look up the history, that plays into everything that went down a little too well. So yeah, that's probably more accurate than you would like it to be.
I think he's actually more self-aware than he lets on.
Oh, I absolutely think he is. I think he is incredibly self-aware and playing into it, and deliberately making the choices that he is making and giving the excuses he is giving because they get him off the hook. And
I think Mersh is a perfect like counter example to that. Like you said, when she gets pushed off the ship, she even says like in her role play moments, like Keyleth looks down and it's like, oh, it's so pretty from up here. You know, she like is enjoying this process of getting shoved off.
Yeah. Well, and like she's rolling with it. Grog is just happy to hit something. Like those are the players that are fun to watch because they're just okay, let's fight a thing.
Yeah. Vax scratching Trinket's ears mid-battle. Like there's humorous elements that they weave into it and bits of personality that they weave into it.
Yeah. Well, and Trinket always deserves scritches because Trinket is the bestest boy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Rocking his new armor.
And there's only so much a bear can do on an airship,
Yeah.
So I feel like Trinket was perfectly happy to be fighting something. I feel like Trinket was probably bored.
Yeah. I mean, he rolled a 1 the one time he tried, so he tried.
He's not very good at fighting, but he tries.
He tried.
Yeah.
Well, are there any personal experiences that come up for you as we go through this?
I think it's just a lot of the times that I have gotten super stressed only to realize that just going with the flow and letting things happen, rolling with it was a lot easier and a lot more fun. I go on road trips about once every year or so. I'll take a week or two and just go on a road trip with people. Things never go to plan on road trips. That's just not how it works.
Things never go to plan. You can just stop the sentence there.
Yeah. But the last one I went on, we got super stressed because there were wildfires in the area we were going through. So a lot of the stuff that we had planned on, accommodations, activities, even the area itself, were all like closed down, and it was adding days to our journey. And we finally just kind of rolled with it and went the opposite direction and found something fun to do. And ended up in a completely different area we never planned on visiting, missed out on some of the highlights that we were hoping for, but we ended up with really cool memories because we just rolled with it and went somewhere else, even if it was completely unexpected. And it's stuff like that like realizing that is just as fun and way less stressful. And that this combat kind of reminded me of that. Just roll with it and head to wherever and it's fine and it'll work out.
Yeah. I mean, I think mine's similar to you in terms of traveling, because I think about the times that I've just been like deposited in a new place, in a new situation, and have had to just like figure shit out. Like I studied abroad in London in college, and I thought it was super interesting to like compare my experience to other people that I know that studied abroad, specifically in England, because they hated it. They absolutely hated it because they had to adapt to a whole new circumstance, and they complained the entire time that they were there. They were depressed and lonely and like all the things, and just like complained the entire time. And I could have easily done that as well. Like I was lonely. You're in a new country. You don't really know anyone.
Right.
You have to learn the customs. You have to find your way around town. You have to, decide what your life looks like in this new place. And I had my own sadness that I was dealing with being lonely. And it's harder to make friends in those types of situations. And it just reminds me of those times where I'm like, all right, so I could have a pity party. And sure, I did have a couple, but I also like forced myself to go out and get a pint, get a veggie burger, go explore. Because England also has free public museums. Like you don't have to pay museum fees to see. So I just went to a ton of museums throughout the day and wandered around and got lost so many times. But you decide what you do with that situation. Like it's not the situation's fault. It's how you react to it.
Yeah. And that can really change your whole perspective
Mhm.
You know, if you had decided to throw a constant pity party,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you know, your experience is just as miserable as the other people's.
Yeah.
You know, if they decide to dig themselves out of that, maybe it changes their experience. Yeah, it's a lot of it is what you make of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to yours. It's like you're faced with the brutal facts of reality. Like there's a fire going on and we can't do what we want to, or we're, you know, deposited into a completely new country and have no idea how anything works. But you decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
What are we being called to do as a result?
I mean, it's gonna start sounding like a broken record, but roll with it. You know, whatever you're doing, just let it happen and make the most of what you've got. And don't stress too much. I'd say don't stress, but that's, you know, not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, is there a specific situation that you're thinking of?
Not really. It's more like a lot of stuff is changing in my life right now, especially professionally. And it's stressful. It's hard to do, but the easiest way to deal with it is to roll with it and see what happens and pick it all up when we land somewhere.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are dealing with frustration right now. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for it out there, but there is some weight to embracing it and befriending it and not letting it become a stress ball of self-sabotage behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, especially like professionally, it's super easy to just focus on the stress and just be in that space the entire time.
Yeah.
But if I do what I can now and pick up the pieces when we're done with the chaos, I'm going to be in a lot better position, at least in terms of mental health, if nothing else. And that counts for something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it also speaks to expectations. Like when you get put into a situation or you approach a new situation, like what are your expectations going into that? Do you expect that it's going to be the same? Do you expect certain things to happen? And how do you manage those expectations to go with the flow or have a better experience of it? Is like, you're in control of that as well.
Right. Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those pieces of advice that floats around and is always around.
Totally.
Just like go with the punches and don't stress. And it's a whole lot easier said than done.
Yeah. And I think that's why it becomes a repeated record too, is because it takes a while for it to actually sink in. Like you understand the words, you understand what these words mean.
Yeah. Well, and applying it in one situation does not look like applying it in another situation.
Totally.
So it's, you know, it's going to be different and new every time you apply that piece of advice. So.
Yeah. And like, I think we need to give ourselves more grace too. Is like Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not like we're going to switch these behaviors, these habits that we have, these expectations that we have overnight. Like, you can't wake up one morning and be like, I'm going with the flow forever.
Well, and I think that especially Pike in this episode, you know, Ashley's not at the table a ton. And so she gets stressed out by it, which is totally fair. It's not an easy game to play. But having that little bit of grace for herself probably would have served her very well here. You know, it's easy to misread spells in the moment. It's easy to, you know, struggle with the mechanics of what is admittedly a complicated game.
Yeah, and like I didn't mention that in my notes, but she did try the Hallow spell first for her first turn, and then realized that the casting time was like 10 minutes.
Right. So,
and I think that's when I made the ill preparedness note as well, is like, that is something that they could have done ahead of time. And she even like kind of shoulds herself and is like, I should have done that ahead of time, but you don't know.
Yeah. Well, and like Hollow is like a 24-hour casting time, I think. It's something ridiculous. Like, you're not going to sit around and do that unless you have a reason to do that. And getting on an airship isn't for them a reason to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know we were talking about what we're called to do, but it felt like something that Pike needed to hear in this episode was give yourself a little grace.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the glory of us using the sacred reading lens and these questions, is because it is all reciprocal too at the end of the day. Like, these personal experiences, these actions that we're being called to take are directly related to the media that we're consuming. And I like the idea of bringing it back around to that, because it is true. Like, they're not separate entities. They're not separate issues. Like,
yeah,
like
they're all tied together. Everything is a circle if you try hard enough.
Yeah. Talk about confirmation bias. Yeah. Well, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
All right. Well, these are powerful themes that we're talking about. And even though they may feel repetitive sometimes, they're worth repeating. So, audience, we definitely encourage you to reach out and share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well, because we'd love to know how these lessons, these insights, these stories are impacting you in your own lives. So special thanks to Alyssa for joining me again on this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, anytime.
So next time we will be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 16, Part 1, and joining me will be Petal. So I'm super excited for that. And I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests. So if you're interested in coming on the series, just hit me up. I'll send you the link. And in the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, and follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.